Hey there, how's it going? It's LordChar1892 and today we're going to be going over why the King Guard Guardian Full Lord boss fight in Lords of the Fallen, in my opinion, is one of the best boss fights in this game. In Lords of the Fallen, there's two different kinds of boss fights. We have main bosses, which will drop a remembrance for you to be able to use their weapons and armor, and then we have mini bosses, which are normally part of side quests and later become regular enemies. The main difference I find between the mini bosses and the main bosses of the game, besides their health and their story implications, is that the mini bosses tend to be a little bit more aggressive with their attacks and attack a lot faster, as opposed to the main bosses, which often take long breaks between attacks or do heavy animation attacks that sometimes don't let you do anything and you just have to wait and watch it play out. For example, the Hush Saint is very notorious for this, as there's large portions of the fight where all you can do is wait. Now personally, I'm not a fan of this kind of style of boss fights, especially in a Souls-like game. I'm more interested in a constant barrage of attacks, which for you to dodge or parry however you see fit, but these long breaks in the fights kind of put me off to them. Now another factor I took into consideration was the boss arena and what mechanics there was to interact with in the Umbral Realm. Now for the Hush Saint, if you interacted in the Umbral Realm, you could soul flay a Umbral Parasite that would shoot up a sort of vine slash tree that would knock him off his horse. Now I chose not to interact with these kind of elements because they were kind of a help towards the boss fight, because there was an option where if you can parry his attack, he'd knock off the horse. So with my criteria over what I prefer in a boss fight out of the way, we're going to be going over some of the boss fights that the community really seems to like. For example, Thancred, Master of Castrations, is one that's very popular with the community. Now, he's pretty good in my opinion. The only thing I don't like about Thancred is, to be honest, a lot of his moves are the same moves that the Hush Saint does. So it's not really new or unique. It's just more of the same thing. He does attack a little bit more frequently, but not as fast as a regular Souls boss attacks. He does take a lot of breaks, like for example, a lot of stuff just is really slow. Another community favorite is Harrower Derva. Now this boss fight does have a somewhat unique arena, as it has pillars that can be destroyed that you can sometimes use to block incoming attacks. Once the pillars are destroyed, they have a Umbral entity or Umbral Parasite that you can interact with, but it does help you in the fight. So once again, you know, I chose not to interact with those because I like to experience these boss fights as pure as I can, just me versus the boss. Now this boss fight is very reminiscent of the Prince boss fight in Dark Souls 3, where you fight the older brother Prince and then the younger brother Prince fuses with him and then you fight both of them. It's basically the same premise here. Once you beat her first form, the other one joins in and then you fight them all over again. But nothing really special happens, just a regular boss fight. Attacks do come in at a slighter, faster pace, but it's still typically slow. Now this next fight is the Light Reaper. Now the Light Reaper unfortunately does have two characters that you need to bring with you to the fight in order to, you know, unlock your achievements, one of them being Paladin Isaac, which you see in the video, and the other one being Kukujin. Now in this run I brought Paladin Isaac because, you know, I needed to do his stuff and unlock just to finish the quest. But this would have been my favorite boss fight in the game because I love how fast the Light Reaper attacks, his fire moves, you know, the consistency of attacks. He lays down fire on the floor that'll trap you. You know, it's an aggressive fight, it's constant attacks, and they do a lot of damage. What I don't like about this fight is that the beginning of the fight takes forever. He comes in on a dragon, does a couple passes, doing some really easy to dodge attacks. You'll fight him for a little bit and then he'll go back up on the dragon, again untargetable, and you have to wait for him to finish, and then finally you fight his third form. If this fight was just strictly his third form the whole time, this would have been easily the best fight in this game. Now this last fight that I'm going to show here is Elaine. Now Elaine is part of the Umbral ending. She is, you have to go through a very convoluted process to get here. You're probably going to need a guide because it's kind of ridiculous, but anyways, this fight is basically Pieta version 2, right? Which is one of my main issues with it, because all it is essentially you're fighting Pieta in ghost form, while Elaine in the back does some AoEs that are, as you can see, those eyeballs that are extremely slow. Once you beat the ghost, she staggers, and then you go in there and do your heavy attack, and then, you know, rinse and repeat. That's it. That's the whole fight. So, not really a fan of it. Okay, so just to recap on what I'm looking for how the arena interacts with the fight, the consistency or rate of attacks, and how there's an interaction with the Umbra realm. So now we're into what I believe is the best fight in the game, which is Kingard, Mr. Follard here. Now the reason why I love this fight is because it gives us all these elements. Now unfortunately, at the time of playing the game, you're not going to be able to experience it the same way anymore, because this fight got nerfed and they removed a lot of the wolves, and now you can only play it in this state once you're at New Game 3, I believe. Okay, so besides the large amount of enemies in this boss fight, another cool feature that it has is this body of water right here, this little lake. Now this little lake hinders your movement, the enemy's movement, so it's a cool little interaction that only exists in the Axiom, right? If you die in this boss fight, you're going to go into the Umbral. Now this is the only fight in the game that has more enemies appear whenever you get into the Umbral realm, sort of a little trigger that makes it a little bit more difficult. Now that is what pushed this fight over the edge for me to be considered one of my favorites. Because you're fighting so many enemies at once, you have to track everybody's movement, right? You're constantly on edge, and you have to, you know, adapt. Now a lot of people were saying that this was the worst fight in the game because it felt so cheap and overwhelming, but in my opinion, this is what made it fun. This is what made it interesting, that once you went into the Umbral, you weren't necessarily safe, because a lot of the boss fights, the reason why they're so easy is because we have 2 lives to fight them. Nothing really changes once you go into Umbral, and this was the only fight where if you did go into the Umbral, especially at a bad time, it's just going to make the boss fight a little bit harder. And then another interaction with the Umbral realm is once you do go into the Umbral and that new enemy appearing, the water does go away, so now you don't have to deal with that movement penalty. So it's just these cool little interactions. I don't know if they were planned or if they're accidental, but these cool little interactions with the arena that really felt like this was a very well designed boss fight. Now at the end of the day, these are just my opinions. I understand that not everybody looks for the same things in their bosses, especially in Souls games or Souls-like games. Now this is just what I believed was the best fight, even though it technically is just a mini boss. Well, thank you guys for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. If you can, go ahead, drop me a subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Now, let me know in the comments section which boss in Lords of the Fallen did you think was the best boss, or if you have multiples. And then also let me know which ones did you hate. Did you hate this fight? Because I know a lot of people hated this Follard fight. But you know, you don't gotta say a deer, because we all hated the deer. I haven't met a single person yet who thinks that the deer fight was good. But you know, let me know in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. And shout out to IGGM for sponsoring the channel. Their information can be found in the description of the video.